The endless expanse of stars surrounded Captain Jace Miller as his spacecraft, Aurora, descended onto the unfamiliar terrain of GLE-9. He had been a traveler, an explorer, and an adventurer ever since humanity had first leaped into interstellar travel. His latest mission, however, was far from exploration. This was a pit stop, a routine stopover on his way back to Earth. But the moment his ship touched the surface, something about GLE-9 felt different. The planet had a stunning landscape. Its twin suns cast a shimmering glow over the crystalline waters of a massive lake that stretched across the horizon. Jace, eager to stretch his legs, grabbed a few supplies and headed toward the lake, curious about what secrets this strange world held. The purple-tinted water sparkled under the twin suns, and as he approached, a sudden splash disturbed the tranquil surface. "Hello?" Jace called out, scanning the lake for the source of the disturbance. He saw nothing at first, and then a slender figure broke through the water, arms flailing in panic. Without hesitation, Jace stripped off his jacket and sprinted to the lake's edge, diving into the icy depths. The water was much colder than he anticipated, biting at his skin as he swam toward the struggling figure. When he reached her, his hand brushed against cool, smooth skin, unmistakably alien. The being's skin was a deep emerald green, shimmering in the sunlight. As Jace pulled her to the surface, her movements weakened, her strength fading as she choked on the purple water. "Hold on, I've got you," Jace grunted, dragging her back toward the shore. The weight of her body was surprisingly light, though her elongated limbs and strikingly human-like form were clearly not of his species. When they finally reached the shore, Jace laid her gently on the ground, his heart pounding. For a moment, he feared the worst, but then her eyes fluttered open. Two piercing, luminescent orbs of violet light met his gaze. The alien girl coughed, expelling water from her lungs before looking up at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and melodic, though accented in a way Jace had never heard before. He offered her a warm smile, kneeling beside her. "Are you all right? What were you doing out there?" Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, filled with a depth he couldn't quite understand. I didn't expect the gravity of your world to be so overwhelming," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've only just arrived." Jace blinked in surprise. "You're new to GLE-9 too? What's your name?" "Lyra," she said quietly, sitting up and wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm not from this world. I'm from the Zathari system." Jace recognized the name. The Zathari were known across the galaxy as a reclusive species, highly advanced, rarely seen by outsiders. It was strange that one of them would be here alone and vulnerable. He shook his head, trying to focus on the immediate problem. "You're lucky I was close by," Jace said, offering her his jacket to keep warm. "The water here is dangerous, especially for those unfamiliar with the environment." Lyra accepted the jacket with a soft nod. "I owe you my life," she murmured, looking down at the fabric draped over her slender frame. "Your kind, humans, are not as primitive as I was led to believe." Jace raised an eyebrow, chuckling softly. "We're not so bad once you get to know us." As Lyra regained her strength, she looked up at Jace with a curious glint in her eyes. "You saved me without hesitation. Why?" He shrugged. "It's just what we do. Humans help when we can." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "Perhaps you are more than I thought." Jace wasn't sure what she meant, but something told him that their encounter was only the beginning. There was a deep sense of connection, a bond that neither of them could quite explain. But in that moment, standing on the shores of the alien lake, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Lyra was safe, and Jace had a feeling his adventure on GLE-9 was far from over. Jace glanced at the sky as the twin suns dipped lower on the horizon. Shadows stretched across the alien landscape, and the temperature began to drop. They couldn't stay near the lake for much longer. His ship, Aurora, was close by, and he decided that the safest place for Lyra would be aboard his vessel. "Come, on. Let's get you someplace warm," Jace said, offering his hand to help her stand. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her violet eyes scanning his face as if she were trying to read his intentions. Then, with a soft nod, she took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet. She was much lighter than he expected, her limbs delicate and her frame almost weightless in the gravity of GLE-9. Yet there was a quiet strength in her movements, a resilience beneath her fragile exterior. As they walked back toward the Aurora, Jace couldn't help but feel a growing sense of curiosity about Lyra and her people. The Zathari were known for their isolationist ways, rarely interacting with other species. So why had she come here, of all places? Inside the ship, the atmosphere was warmer, and Lyra visibly relaxed as she stepped into the small but cozy cabin. Jace gestured toward the bench along the wall, and she sat down, still wrapped in his jacket. "Do you want something to drink? Maybe some water or tea?" Jace offered, rummaging through his supplies. Lyra shook her head. "No, thank you. Your kindness is enough." Jace poured himself a cup of tea anyway, his mind buzzing with questions. He sat down across from her, taking a sip before deciding to break the silence. "So, what brought you here? GLE-9 isn't exactly a tourist spot?" Lyra's eyes flickered with a brief flash of something, an emotion Jace couldn't quite place. She sighed softly, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the jacket. "I didn't come here by choice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was sent." Jace frowned. "Sent? By who? And why?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It's complicated. The Zathari, they don't value individuality the way humans do. We live for the collective good, and those who don't conform to the expectations of our society are often discarded." Jace felt a pang of empathy for her. "So they abandoned you?" Lyra nodded slowly. "In a way, yes. I was seen as flawed, imperfect. I didn't fit into their vision of what Zathari should be, so they sent me away, hoping I would never return." Jace leaned back in his chair, trying to wrap his mind around the cruelty of it. To be cast out by your own people, left to fend for yourself on a strange planet. It was unimaginable. "That's terrible," Jace muttered. "No one deserves that." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you. But in some ways, I'm relieved. I'm free now. Free to make my own choices, even if I don't know what those choices are yet." Jace studied her for a moment, struck by her strength despite the sadness in her voice. He admired her courage, the way she had faced rejection and exile with quiet dignity. But there was something else, a mystery lurking beneath the surface, and he had a feeling their adventure was only just beginning. Jace studied Lyra for a moment, struck by her quiet strength despite the sadness in her voice. He admired her courage, the way she had faced rejection and exile with quiet dignity. But there was something else, a mystery lurking beneath the surface. Before he could ask another question, the ship's sensors blared a sharp warning. Jace turned to the console, his heart quickening. An energy surge, powerful and erratic, was building beneath the surface of the lake. Lyra stiffened, her violet eyes widening. "Something's waking up," she whispered. Jace quickly checked the scanners. "It's coming from beneath the water, something massive." A tremor shook the ground beneath the Aurora. Outside the cockpit window, the lake's surface churned violently, glowing with an unnatural purple light. Then, with a deafening roar, a colossal form broke through the water. Jace could hardly believe his eyes. It was an enormous, serpentine creature, covered in shimmering black scales that seemed to drink in the twin suns' light. Multiple glowing eyes lined its head, each one burning with an eerie intelligence. A sentinel, Lyra murmured. Jace's grip tightened on the ships. Controls. You've seen one before? She shook her head, her voice barely above a breath. Only in legends. The sentinel let out another ear-splitting roar, and the ship's alarms blared again. Energy levels were spiking, rapidly. We need to go. Now, Jace said, fingers flying over the controls. But before the ship could take off, something else caught his attention. Beyond the lake, 3 dark shapes moved through the thick foliage, moving with purpose toward the shore. Jace narrowed his eyes. Soldiers. They were humanoid, clad in sleek black armor with glowing insignias on their chests. They carried weapons that pulsed with an eerie energy, and they were heading straight for the sentinel. Who the hell are they? Jace muttered. Lyra paled. They're after the relic. Jace shot her a look. Relic? Lyra hesitated. The sentinels. They were created to guard something. The architects, an ancient race, hid their greatest artifacts on select planets, shielding them with powerful guardians. The lake. It's more than just a body of water. The relic must be beneath it. The ground rumbled again as the sentinel let out another bone-rattling growl. The soldiers, unfazed, raised their weapons, and before Jace could process what was happening, beams of crackling energy shot toward the creature. The sentinel screeched in pain. It retaliated with a burst of energy that sent a shockwave across the landscape, knocking the soldiers back. But they recovered quickly, moving with an eerie precision, continuing their assault. They're trying to kill it, Jace realized. They want the relic, Lyra confirmed. If they get it, the consequences could be catastrophic. Jace clenched his jaw. He didn't know much about ancient relics or cosmic guardians, but one thing was clear. Whoever these soldiers were, they weren't here for a peaceful exchange. All right, he said, determination hardening his voice. Then we get to the relic first. Lyra looked at him, startled. Jace, it's dangerous. More dangerous than letting those guys get their hands on it? Jace shot back. We have to move. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Without wasting another second, Jace engaged the ship's thrusters, pushing the Aurora into a sharp descent toward the lake's edge. The moment they landed, the ship's ramp extended, and Jace and Lyra sprinted out. The Sentinel was still engaged in battle, thrashing against its attackers, sending waves crashing onto the shore. Lyra pointed toward the lake. The relic will be deep beneath the surface. Jace exhaled sharply. Great. Back into the freezing water. But before they could move, one of the soldiers spotted them. Go! Jace ordered Lyra, drawing his blaster. She hesitated, but then dove into the water without another word. Jace turned just in time to dodge a blast of energy that scorched the ground where he had been standing. He fired back, forcing the soldier to take cover. The battle between the Sentinel and the soldiers raged on, but Jace wasn't focused on them anymore. His job was simple. Buy Lyra enough time to find the relic. He ducked behind a jagged rock, formation, firing another precise shot. One soldier fell, but 2 more took his place. Come on, Lyra, he thought, gritting his teeth. Under the water, Lyra swam deeper into the lake's depths. The further she went, the more the energy around her intensified. The water pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, drawing her toward the source. Then she saw it. Nestled within an ancient, crumbling structure lay the relic. It was crystalline, glowing with an inner light that pulsed in time with her own heartbeat. Symbols, older than any known civilization, lined its smooth surface. As soon as she touched it, a wave of energy pulsed outward. The lake trembled, the Sentinel let out an earth-shaking roar, and the soldiers all turned, suddenly aware of what had just happened. Lyra's eyes widened. She had just triggered something much, much bigger than any of them had anticipated. Back on the shore, Jace's stomach sank. Oh, that can't be good. And then, the world around them exploded in a burst of violet light. Jace barely had time to react before a massive shockwave rippled outward from the lake, sending him stumbling backward. The soldiers who had been attacking the sentinel were thrown to the ground, momentarily stunned by the sheer force of energy that pulsed through the air. From the water, Lyra shot upward, clutching the relic in her hands. The crystalline artifact pulsed with an intense violet glow, the symbols along its surface now fully illuminated. She gasped for air, her eyes glowing as the energy from the relic coursed through her body. Jace sprinted toward her, his heart pounding. "Lyra, what did you do? I didn't mean to trigger it," she breathed, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "It's responding to something ancient." The ground trembled once more, and a deafening roar filled the air. The sentinel, now completely enraged, turned its massive head toward Lyra, its glowing eyes narrowing. Jace cursed under his breath. "It thinks you're the threat now." The soldiers, recovering from the shock wave, turned their attention to Lyra as well. One of them raised his weapon, aiming directly at the relic. "Stop them!" he barked in an unfamiliar dialect, his voice distorted through a helmet modulator. Jace acted on instinct, raising his blaster and firing before the soldier could react. The shot struck the enemy's weapon, sending sparks flying as the weapon was disabled. "Not today," Jace muttered before grabbing Lyra's hand. "We have to go. Now." Lyra's hands trembled as she clutched the relic tightly. "The sentinel. It won't let us leave with this." "We'll deal with that problem once we're in the air," Jace shot back. The sentinel let out a piercing wail before lurching toward them, its massive form crushing the rocky terrain beneath it. With each step, the ground shook violently, and Jace knew they had mere seconds before it reached them. "Run!" They sprinted toward the Aurora, weaving between scattered boulders as the sentinel closed in. Behind them, the soldiers were also scrambling to regroup, some abandoning their attack in favor of self-preservation. Jace reached the ship first, slamming his fist against the access panel. The ramp began to lower, agonizingly slow in the face of imminent danger. "Hurry!" he shouted as Lyra ran up the ramp behind him. The moment she was inside, Jace hit the emergency lift command, causing the ramp to retract as he sprinted toward the cockpit. The sentinel roared again, its claws swiping at the ship just as Jace pulled the controls, engaging full thrusters. The Aurora jerked violently as it lifted off, barely avoiding the massive beast's grasp. Lyra clutched the relic against her chest, breathing heavily. "It won't stop. It's bound to this place." Jace's hands moved swiftly across the controls, adjusting their flight trajectory. "Then let's make sure we put as much distance between us and it as possible." But before he could push the ship into full acceleration, an alert flashed across the console. "Multiple inbound ships," Jace muttered, eyes narrowing at the screen. More enemy vessels were approaching fast, likely reinforcements sent by the soldiers they had just escaped. Lyra's expression darkened. "They're not giving up." Jace clenched his jaw. "No, they're not." A burst of enemy fire streaked past them, barely missing the hull. The Aurora shook as Jace banked hard to avoid another barrage. The enemy ships were fast, maneuvering with precision as they attempted to surround them. Lyra shut her eyes for a moment, concentrating. The relic in her hands pulsed faintly, its energy shifting around them. Jace spared her a quick glance. "Tell me you have some kind of magic trick up your sleeve," she exhaled slowly. "Not magic, but I can feel something, like a connection between the relic and—" She suddenly pointed to the navigation console. "There! That anomaly! It's where we need to go." Jace followed her gaze to the swirling energy disturbance that had appeared on the scanner. It wasn't just any anomaly, it was an unstable rift in space, a gravitational distortion unlike anything he had ever seen. "You want me to fly into that?" Jace asked incredulously. Lyra nodded, urgency in her voice. "It's connected to the relic. If we bring it there, we can seal whatever was disturbed and cut off the source of their pursuit." Jace muttered a curse under his breath, but knew they had no other option. "Fine, hold on tight." He yanked the controls, veering the ship hard toward the anomaly. The enemy ships adjusted their course, still in pursuit, but as they neared, the rift, turbulence increased, and the gravitational forces began to shift. Jace gritted his teeth. "If this kills us, I just want to say, it's been one hell of a ride." Lyra almost smiled. "We'll make it." The Aurora shot toward the anomaly at full speed. The enemy ships hesitated, some veering away as the turbulence worsened. Lyra lifted the relic, and suddenly, its glow intensified. A massive surge of energy radiated outward, pulsing in sync with the rift. The enemy ships closest to them were thrown off course, their systems malfunctioning as the energy scrambled their controls. Jace saw the window of opportunity. "This is it! Hang on!" With a final push, the Aurora pierced the heart of the anomaly, engulfed in a blinding surge of light. And then, everything went still. Jace gasped as the ship re-emerged into open space. The enemy ships were gone. The rift, once unstable, now shimmered with a calm, fading glow. Lyra exhaled slowly, lowering the relic. It worked. Jace let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Yeah, it did. Silence filled the cockpit as they stared out into the vast emptiness before them. The danger had passed, but Jace knew this wasn't over. They had escaped, but they had also uncovered something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. Lyra turned to him. "The relic. It wasn't just a key. It was a warning." Jace frowned. "Warning for what?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "Something is coming." Jace ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head with a dry chuckle. "Great. Just what I needed." Lyra hesitated, then smiled softly. "You did save me after all. You humans. You really do help when you can." Jace smirked, starting up the navigation system. "Yeah, well, guess that means we're in this together now." As the Aurora drifted into the endless expanse of stars, Jace knew that whatever awaited them next, they wouldn't be facing it alone, because their journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning.